In this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe, leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great day to all my self-care family and friends. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so happy that you guys have made space to be here with us today. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I need for everyone to do me a favor. If you're feeling the vibe, go ahead, show us some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need you to share this out with someone who could use a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you have yet to do so, go ahead and hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you are always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite you to visit our digital home at theselfcareclub.org, where you will find everything you need from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported every step of the way. Just know that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I encourage you to give yourself permission to pause, to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly, for you. And remember, if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop a green heart in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Thank you guys so much for the heart me's and for tapping the screen. I so appreciate you. Now, today's conversation, this is going to be real. Some would say this is another one of those unhinged life coach kind of sessions. You know, not polished, not filtered, not wrapped up into, the cute inspirational quotes that people post and then go right back to moving funny in real life. No, we're not doing that today. Today, we are talking about something that a lot of people feel, but don't always say out loud. Because somewhere along your healing journey, and, if you've been doing the work, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There comes a moment where your awareness starts waking up, right? Where your spirit starts to notice things that it used to ignore. Be it, maybe the tone in certain conversations starts sounding different. Maybe the timing of certain messages starts looking suspicious. Maybe the energy behind people's words start feeling off, right? And suddenly you're just sitting there looking at your phone like, why are you texting me? Right, Miss Portia? You just be looking at the phone like, right? Because when you start healing, your discernment starts to get a little sharper. You start noticing who checked on you when life was heavy and who magically reappeared the moment that you start glowing again. You start noticing who was silent when you were rebuilding, but now they want a progress report. And when those little messages start hitting different, right? The ones where it'd be like, hey, stranger, just checking on you. Right? Hope everything is going good for you. I was thinking about you. Now listen, let me be fair before we get too far. Okay? Sometimes those messages are genuine. Sometimes somebody really did think about you. Sometimes somebody's heart really did pull them to reach out to you. Sometimes it really is love. But other times, right? them other times, let's just call it what it is, right? It feels like surveillance disguised as concern. Like somebody peeking through the window of your life just to see what you've been up to. Like somebody knocking on the door that they never helped you build, but now they want to see what the house look like. And when you've done enough healing, when you've done enough crying, enough journaling and praying and reflecting and rebuilding and learning how to choose yourself, your tolerance for that kind of energy changes. Suddenly those little check-ins don't feel sweet. They feel strategic, right? And, every now and then somebody sends one of those messages and the only thing your spirit wants to respond with is, the real response, the unfiltered response, the response that you type and then you delete 3 times because you're trying to stay healed. That message that says, I'm good, mind your business, right? And I know that might sound just a little bit spicy, right? Some people hear that and think, dang, that's harsh. But today we're going to talk about what's really underneath that feeling, right? Because sometimes that response isn't about being rude. It's about setting the boundaries. It's about the emotional exhaustion. It's about finally realizing that not everybody who checks on you is actually checking for you, right? We're going to talk about them people who, claim to pray for you, but really all they doing is praying on you. And we have to understand that sometimes, it's the clarity that comes from protecting your peace after a long season of giving people access that they never deserved in the first place. And so today, that's what we're going to unpack, right? We're going to talk about, is it growth? Is it boundaries? Is it old hurt that hasn't fully healed yet? Or is it wisdom that comes from finally learning the difference between people who care about your life and people who just want updates about your life? So let's start by talking about when those check-ins don't feel like care, right? Because I think this is where a lot of us quietly start feeling the shift. Not every, hey, how are you, is actually about you, right? I'm going to say that again for the people on the outside, right? Who are still trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. My potential peace people. Not every how are you is about your well-being. Sometimes it's curiosity. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's boredom. And sometimes it's somebody trying to check the emotional temperature to see if they still have access to your life. You ever get one of those messages and immediately you pause before responding? It's like your intuition taps you on the shoulder like, wait a minute. Why are they texting you now? Why I got to get a hey big head text now? Because see, timing tells the story. You didn't hear from them when you were going through it. Right? You didn't hear from them when you were stressed. Not when you were overwhelmed. Not when you were crying in the car trying to figure out what your next move was going to be. Hi, Aunt Yvonne. But now, all of a sudden, now that you're moving differently, now that your energy feels lighter, now that you are glowing and your life looks a little more stable, oh, baby, here they come. Happy belated birthday. Right? Here they come. Everybody tell Aunt Yvonne happy belated birthday. So yeah, now that you're starting to glow more, all of a sudden here them people come. Your cake was beautiful, by the way. I love the way she did your cake. It was so cute. Okay, let me focus, y'all. Let me focus, but I had to tell my auntie happy birthday. So yeah, now that you glowing, you know what I'm saying? You know, people want to come around. Here they come with the hey stranger. And listen, that "hey stranger" message, that's always interesting to me, right? Because half the time, the reason you're a stranger now is because they disappeared. I love you more. That the reason why there's distance between y'all is because they created it, right? Somehow the tone of their message acts like, the distance just magically happened on its own. Like y'all both drifted apart in the wind. You were like, Jack, come back. And Jack just floated on away out to sea. No, that's, some people don't just drift away. They detached when you were no longer convenient. And now that, they're circling back around to see what version of you is still available to them, what access they still have to you. Welcome in, Courtney. And that's the part that people don't like to talk about. Some check-ins aren't about connection. They're simply about access. Access to your life. Access to your progress. Access to your peace. Because when someone used to have emotional access to you, it can feel uncomfortable for them when the door closes. So they send a little message to see if their key still works. Right? Just checking on you. Now, let me say this clearly before somebody clips this part and runs with it, because folks run in and out. I'm not saying that checking on people is a bad thing. I do check-ins all the time in our community. When it's on my heart to send out the check-ins, or when I think about a person, I check in. So I'm not saying that check-ins are a bad thing, because real care does exist. But real care usually looks different. See, real care shows up consistently. Real care shows up, when life is messy, not just when it looks peaceful. Real care doesn't only appear when your energy is good again. Real care doesn't disappear when things get heavy. But when someone was nowhere to be found during your rebuilding, and now all of a sudden they're suddenly curious about your life, your spirit is going to start to ask you questions. Not out of bitterness, but out of awareness, right? And that awareness can make even simple messages feel different. Because when you've spent enough time, right, doing the work, healing, reflecting, setting boundaries, learning how to protect your energy, you stop responding automatically. Welcome in, Tamika, Elevated Awakenings, right? You start paying attention. You start asking yourself, is this genuine? Or is this just somebody checking in to see if they have access to your space again? And, sometimes after you sit with that question long enough, thank you for the heart me, right? The most honest answer you have left is, I'm good. Short, clear, no invitation attached to it. No, keep hope alive. No, you still got it in the message, right? Because not every single check-in deserves full access to your life anymore. And that realization is part of your growth. See, we have to begin to understand that access is a privilege, not a right. Healing will teach you something that people who benefited from the old version of you might not like. Everybody does not deserve access to the healed version of you. I'm going to say it again. Just because someone knew you when you were struggling, just because someone knew you when you were available, just because someone knew you when you were overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending yourself, does not mean that they automatically qualify for the version of you that did the work to grow. Everybody does not have access to the healed version of you. See, the healed version of you didn't just appear overnight, right? That version cost something. And when I tell you that version costs something, I'm talking about the tears. It costs lonely nights. It costs therapy sessions, journaling sessions, prayer sessions, conversations with yourself that nobody else ever heard. It costs boundaries, right? And let me tell you something about boundaries. People who are comfortable with unlimited access to you don't like them. Because when someone is used to having full emotional access to you, boundaries feel like rejection to them. But that healed version of you knows that boundaries aren't rejection. They are clarity. They're you finally understanding that your energy is valuable. See, back in the day, a lot of us were operating like, emotional customer service representatives. Everybody could call, everybody could vent, everybody could show up with their drama, their problems, their opinions, their chaos, and we would just sit there trying to hold space for everybody. But who held you? Who was checking on you constantly? Who was pouring back into you? Because some people weren't checking on your well-being. They were simply checking to see if you were still available for their baggage. And that is a hard truth. And when you start realizing that, something shifts inside of you, right? You stop answering every single message with the same energy. You stop giving people the same emotional access that they used to have. You stop feeling obligated to explain your healing to people who weren't around during your rebuilding. And the truth is, the healed version of you is not community property. Welcome in, Michelle. Right? It's sacred. And sacred things require discernment. Some people knew you when you were surviving. Some people knew you when you were people pleasing. Some people knew you when you were saying yes to things that drained your spirit. But now, right, 2026, in this season, this healed or healing version of you, this version protects her peace. This version knows her worth. This version doesn't overextend herself just to make other people comfortable. This version decides who gets access. Because not everybody is getting a VIP pass. Not everybody gets the behind the scenes view of your life. Some people will only see the highlights from the distance now. And that's not being petty. That is self-respect, right? Because healing will eventually teach you that your peace is expensive. It costs too much for you to just hand it out freely to people who never valued it in the first place. And once you realize that, you stop feeling guilty about protecting your access. You stop feeling guilty about, not entertaining every single conversation. You stop feeling guilty about keeping certain parts of your life private. Because the truth is, access was never meant to be unlimited. It was always meant to be earned. And see, when you're healing, that growth that takes place, that changes what you tolerate. Now, family, this is the part that I think that people don't warn you about, when they tell you that healing is beautiful. Because healing is beautiful, but it's also uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable because growth changes what your spirit is willing to tolerate. Things that used to feel normal suddenly feel heavy. Conversations you used to entertain start to feel draining. Dynamics you used to excuse start feeling disrespectful. And it's not because you suddenly became difficult. It's because your awareness woke up. See, when you start doing the work on yourself, and I'm talking about the real work, not the superficial work, right? The real work, the reflection, the therapy, the coaching, the prayer, the journaling, the accountability conversations with yourself, right? That real work, your nervous system starts recalibrating. You recognize, you start recognizing your energy faster. You start recognizing manipulation faster. You start recognizing when someone only shows up, out of habit, or when somebody is showing up out of love. And that's when things start to feel different. You might find yourself in a conversation thinking, why does this feel exhausting? Or maybe you're reading a message and immediately feel your shoulders tense up. Maybe you're looking at somebody's name pop up on the screen when they're calling and you're thinking, I don't have the energy for this today. And that does not mean that you hate the person. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person, right? It simply means that growth changes your capacity. When you were younger, emotionally or spiritually, you had a higher tolerance for chaos and drama, right? You had a higher tolerance for people showing up in your life inconsistently. Because back then, you were still learning how to choose yourself. Back then, you were still trying to keep everybody else comfortable. Back then, you were still measuring love by how much you were willing to endure. But as you mature, physically, mentally, emotionally, right? As you begin to mature, your standards start to shift. Your spirit starts craving peace instead of intensity. You stop romanticizing the struggle. You stop confusing chaos with connection. You stop tolerating dynamics that require you to shrink just to keep the peace. And let me tell you something. That shift will confuse the hell out of people, especially those who benefited from the old version of you. Because the old version of you probably answered every single call. The old version of you may have explained everything. The old version of you might have kept showing up even when he or she was exhausted. But see, this healed or healing version of you, baby, she pauses. She sees everything. She observes. She asks herself or himself questions like, does this interaction leave me feeling grounded or drained? Is this person adding peace to my life or pulling energy from it? And see, once you start asking those questions honestly, your tolerance changes. Your responses change. Sometimes your silence changes. Because growth teaches you something powerful. Just because you can respond doesn't mean you should. Just because somebody reaches out doesn't mean that you're obligated to reopen the door. Sometimes the most honest thing that your spirit can say when something feels misaligned is simply, I'm good. Not defensive, not angry, just aware. Because once you've experienced peace, your soul stops negotiating chaos. Like, we just don't have that to do no more. And we have to understand that sometimes I'm good is a complete sentence. Right? I think that we need to talk about, this because a lot of us are still learning how to do this without feeling guilty, right? The giving short answers. Hey, coach, welcome in. Thank you for the heart me. Right? Because somewhere along the way, many of us were conditioned to believe that every single response needed to be a full explanation. If somebody asks you how we're doing, we feel obligated to give a whole report, right? We got to give them the emotional update, the life update, the family update, the healing process report. And if we don't, we feel rude, dismissive. We feel like we're doing something wrong, right? Coach said, and don't. But look, let me tell you something healing teaches you real quick. See, that and don't came from a healed woman, okay? I need you guys to understand that you do not owe everyone a window into your life just because they knocked at the door. Sometimes people ask you how you're doing, not because they're prepared to hold space for the answer, but because they expect a polite exchange. You know the script, right? Hey, how you doing? I'm good. How are you? I'm good too. Conversation over. Right? But when you've done the work on yourself, you start realizing something. A lot of people aren't asking because they want to hold your truth. They're asking because it's socially polite. Think about how many times you politely, do the adult thing, just trying to say hi to somebody that you know you don't even fool with. And it's, hey, how you doing? Then her little fake self be like, oh, girl, I'm doing good. How you doing? And you be like, I'm good. And they be like, all right. And then you walk away. And you walk away, be like, I can't stand her ass. Right? Well, what was the point? Why did we even do that exchange? Why did we even waste that energy? Right? Because see, when you recognize that, you'll start to, stop feeling the need to perform emotional labor for casual curiosity. What's the point of asking her how she doing? You don't even like her. So good or bad, you don't care. Shonda, welcome in, Grand Rising. Right. Craig's mom. Exactly. Because again, you guys, let's be honest. Some people will ask you how you doing, but the moment that you give them the real answer, the energy shifts. Right? Because if you really get in that real answer, baby, you're going to notice that they get real uncomfortable. Suddenly, they're trying to change the subject. Suddenly, they're not available for the depth that they just opened the door to. That's why sometimes the most aligned response is just, I'm good. Right, Roxy? Just say, I'm good. That's it. No emotional essay. No over-explaining. No feeling like you have to justify where you are in life. Just calm clarity. Because peace doesn't require you to narrate your life to everyone who asks you about it. Now, don't get me wrong, y'all. There are people in your life who deserve the real answers. There are people who have earned access to your truth. Right? People who have shown up consistently. People who have proven that they can sit with you in both the highs and the lows. See, those are the people who get the deeper conversations. Elevated Awakenings, Fearless, welcome in, beautiful. Right? They get the deeper conversations, but everybody else, baby, y'all get headline news. And there's nothing wrong with that, because emotional access should be intentional. Exactly, Melody. It is exclusive, because in 2026, y'all, we not for the streets. We not for everybody, right? So some people just get headlines. Your healing isn't public property. Your progress isn't a group discussion. Your peace isn't something that you owe every person who decides to check in on you out of curiosity. And sometimes protecting that peace looks like something very simple. I'm good. No tension, no apology, no extra explanation attached. Just a complete sentence. I'm good. Because the healed version of you understands something that the old version struggled with. And it's that You don't have to explain your boundaries to people who never respected them in the first place. And once that truth starts to settle into your spirit, you stop feeling guilty about keeping certain parts of your life private. Not everybody needs the full story. Some people just need the answer that they ask for. How you doing? I'm good. Okay. Okay. Like, because why you asking? You ain't been here. You haven't been concerned with how I'm doing. So let's go ahead and keep it moving. Right? And I also want to talk about accountability. Because, before we get too comfortable in our mind your business energy, we got to pause and, talk about accountability, because healing is not just about calling other people out. It's also about checking ourselves. See, immediately when people hear the word accountability, they look outward. What is everybody else doing? How can I hold other people accountable? But when you hear the word accountability, it should all of a sudden put a mirror in front of you for you to see yourself. Because accountability also means checking ourselves too. And if we're going to be honest in this space, right? And y'all know I believe in healing out loud. Sometimes we label something as fake when what we're really feeling is unresolved hurt. Sometimes someone sends you a simple message. Hey, just checking on you. And immediately your mind starts building a whole story. What do they want? Why are they texting me now? They weren't there before. They probably just being nosy. Right? Maybe your intuition is right. But sometimes it's also possible that the message is genuine, but our trust muscle is still healing. Because when somebody has hurt you before, when someone disappointed you, abandoned you, ignored you, or made you feel unseen, your nervous system remembers that and it holds on to that. Your body remembers that. So even if somebody approaches you with good intentions now, your spirit may still be in protection mode. You're not crazy for feeling that way. That's emotional self-protection after, being burned. But growth asks us to be honest with ourselves. Are we responding from discernment or are we responding from defense? Because those two things can look very similar on the outside. Discernment says, I've observed patterns and I'm choosing not to reopen that door. But defense says, I'm still hurting and I don't want to risk being hurt again. And both of those responses are very human. But healing requires awareness. Sometimes the person reaching out really has changed. Sometimes the person reaching out really did think about you. Sometimes the person reaching out is trying to reconnect with you in a healthier way. Now, this doesn't mean that you owe them immediate access, but it does mean that we should pause long enough to ask ourselves the honest question. Am I protecting my peace or am I protecting my pain? Because there's a difference. Protecting your peace is intentional. Protecting your pain is reactive. Protecting your peace says, I see the situation clearly and I'm choosing what aligns with my well-being. Right? Welcome in, CC Elevated Awakenings, and thank you for the heart me. So again, protecting my peace says, I see the situation clearly, but I'm choosing what aligns with my well-being. Protecting your pain says, I don't trust anything connected to that person anymore. And if we're not careful, pain can make us close doors that healing might eventually allow us to open again. Not necessarily for closeness, but for closure. So I hope that you guys hear me clearly. This does not mean that you need to let everybody back into your life. Some doors were closed for a reason. Some relationships were removed because they were unhealthy. Some people lost access to you because they mishandled your heart. But accountability asks us to stay honest about where our responses are coming from. Is it wisdom? Or is it a wound that hasn't fully healed? Part of becoming emotionally mature is learning how to sit with those questions without immediately blaming somebody else. Healing means you can acknowledge when something hurt and recognize that your healing still has layers. Thank you, Butterfly. Unique Creation, welcome in. You're not just protecting your peace, but you're understanding your pain too. And I think when we talk about protecting our peace, I immediately think of boundaries, right? And people always say boundaries are building walls. Both of them, we have boundaries and then we do have walls. And that wall can be a boundary as well, because, both can look distant. Both can look like silence. Both can look like someone stepping back from certain people or situations or conversations. But the energy behind them is completely different. I told y'all when we started, I was tired as hell, but alive and well. So bear with me here. But yeah, so the energy behind these two things can be completely different. Boundaries are rooted in peace. Thank you. I took my hubby's hat today. Go back, guys. Boundaries are rooted in peace. Walls are rooted in pain. And I'm going to explain that. When you set a boundary, you're not trying to punish anyone. You're not trying to prove a point. You're not trying to make someone feel the way that they made you feel. You're simply saying, this is what protects my peace now. Boundaries are calm. They are intentional. They come from clarity. Now, walls, on the other hand, walls usually come from survival mode. Walls say that nobody gets close enough to ever hurt me again. And listen, if you've been through enough disappointment, betrayal, emotional exhaustion, it makes sense why your walls are starting to go up. Because when your heart has been mishandled enough times, protection becomes instinct. You start moving differently. You stop answering certain calls. You stop explaining certain things. You stop allowing certain conversations. And sometimes that shift feels necessary. But here's the question that healing will eventually ask you to sit with. Am I protecting my peace? Or am I protecting myself from ever being vulnerable again? Because peace still allows room for connection. Walls eliminate that completely. Peace says, I'm intentional about who gets access to me. Walls say, ain't nobody getting access to me. Peace says, I'm choosing alignment. Walls say, I'm choosing isolation. And sometimes, if we're honest, when people say, I'm just protecting my peace, what they're really doing is protecting themselves from feeling anything ever again. But healing isn't about becoming emotionally numb. Healing isn't about becoming unavailable to the world. Healing is about learning who deserves your openness and who doesn't. It's about learning that access should be selective, not non-existent. Because the goal to healing isn't to close your heart forever. The goal is to stop handing your heart to people who don't know how to hold it. And that takes practice. It takes discernment. It takes slowing down long enough to ask yourself, is this distance coming from wisdom or fear? Is this silence coming from clarity or from avoidance? Because protecting your peace is healthy, right? Building walls so high that nobody can reach you anymore, that's not peace. That is loneliness wearing a boundary outfit. And real healing helps you to learn the difference between that. So let's talk about what, real care actually looks like. Because once you experience it, you'll never confuse it with that surface level check-in again. Because real care moves differently. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's not random appearances every 6 months, followed by, hey, big head, hey, stranger, right? Real care is consistent. It shows up when life is boring, not just when life is interesting. It shows up when you're struggling, not just when you're winning. Real care doesn't disappear when things get heavy. Because let's be honest, a lot of people like the highlight version of you, right? They like the version of you that's doing well, the version that's glowing, the version that's inspiring everybody else. But the version of you that's tired, the version of you that is rebuilding, the version of you that doesn't have the answers yet, that version tends to get a lot quieter support. And that's where you learn who's really in your corner. Because real check-ins don't feel like curiosity. They feel like presence, right? They sound different. They look different. Real care doesn't just say, hey, how are you? Real care asks the question that actually holds the space, right? It says, how are you really doing lately? Do you need anything right now? I know things have been heavy for you. I just wanted to remind you that I'm here. That kind of energy feels different in your body. It doesn't make your shoulders tense. It doesn't make you question motives. It doesn't make you feel like someone is fishing for information. It feels safe. It feels steady, right? And here's the truth. Real care usually comes from people who showed up quietly when no one else was watching. The friend who checked on you when you were going through it. The person who listened when you needed to vent without turning it into gossip later. The person who didn't disappear just because life got complicated. See, those are the people whose check-ins feel different. Because they're not trying to, just keep tabs on your life. They're trying to support your life. And when you experience that kind of presence, something inside you shifts. You stop accepting the bare minimum. You stop entertaining conversations that feel performative. You stop confusing curiosity with care. Because your spirit learns the difference between someone asking about your life and someone genuinely caring about your well-being. And that awareness changes how you respond. You don't become cold. You don't become unkind. You simply become more intentional about who gets access to your time, your energy, your truth. Because once you've experienced real care, you realize that not every single check-in deserves a full doorway to your life. Some people get the living room. Some people get the porch. Some people only get to wave from the sidewalk, and that's okay. No fear, no doubt. Welcome in, bro. It's all good, right? Because protecting your peace doesn't mean shutting people out. It means recognizing the difference between the people who want access and the people who genuinely want to stand with you. So the last part that I want to talk about is curating your space as a part of your healing. See, this part right here is something that I think a lot of people don't realize until they've, been on their healing journey for a while. At some point, you stop trying to keep everybody comfortable and you start choosing alignment instead. Because for a long time, I think that many of us were raised to believe that being a good person meant being available to everybody. Be nice, be accommodating, be understanding, be the bigger person. And while there's nothing wrong with kindness, a lot of us were taught kindness without boundaries. So we became the people that everybody could lean on. Everybody could vent to. Everybody could call when they needed advice. Everybody could come to when their life was falling apart. But when it was time for somebody to hold space for you, now everybody want to get quiet. And that realization hits different when you're healing. Because when you start doing the work on yourself, you start realizing how much of your energy you use, and how much of that energy used to go towards maintaining relationships that weren't actually reciprocal. You were always the one checking in. You were always the one reaching out. You were always the one who kept the connection alive. And the moment that you stop doing that, right? The moment you stop doing all the emotional labor, that relationship faded. Right? That's when you realize that some connections were never mutual. They were maintenance based. As long as you were watering the relationship, it stayed alive. But the moment you stopped pouring into it, it dried up. And that realization can be painful at first. Right? I told you, during your healing process, you're going to go through several different stages of grief. And nobody likes realizing that certain relationships existed mostly because of their effort. But healing reframes that truth. Instead of seeing it as a loss, you start to see it as clarity. You start understanding that your life doesn't have to include everyone who once had access to you. You begin curating space. And curating means being intentional. Intentional about who you share your energy with. Intentional about who you give your time to. Intentional about which relationships feel reciprocal and which ones feel like it's just emotional work. And during this time, your circle might get smaller, but your peace gets bigger. Your conversations become deeper. Your connections become more genuine. And the people who remain in your life, they're not there because you kept chasing them. They're there because they chose to stay present. And another truth that I feel like a lot of people won't say out loud is that not everybody is meant to walk through every season of your life. Some people were meant for this chapter. Some people were meant for a lesson. Some people were meant to show you exactly what kind of energy you no longer want to entertain. And once you learn those lessons, your responsibility shifts. Your responsibility becomes protecting the life that you're building, right? Not opening the door just because somebody knocks. Not explaining your piece to people who only knew your chaos. not shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable again. Because that healed version of you understands something that the old version of you struggled with. And it's simply that your life is not a waiting room where people get to sit until they decide they're ready to show up. Your life is a sacred space. And sacred spaces are curated. Not everybody gets a key. And that doesn't make you difficult. It makes you intentional. So let's bring this whole conversation home today, right? Because if we're being honest, this topic touches something real for a lot of us, right? I see those green hearts in the chat. And for every single green heart that I see, I know that at some point in your healing journey, you started to realize that peace changed the way you interact with people. You're starting to realize that your time, your energy, your emotional space, that all of those things are valuable. And when something is valuable, you stop handing it out so casually. And you don't do so out of anger or bitterness. You do it out of awareness. Because the truth is, a lot of us spent years being emotionally available to people who only showed up when it was convenient for them. When, we answered the calls, we held the conversations, we listened to the venting. Oh God, the venting, right? We showed up when they needed support. But when it was time for somebody to hold space for us, baby, the line got quiet. The room emptied. And if you've ever been through that, you know how deeply that can change the way you move. You start learning the difference between people who want access to your life and people who actually care about your well-being. And once you see that difference, you can't unsee it. Suddenly the energy around, certain conversations starts to feel different. Certain check-ins feel genuine, others feel performative. And that's where discernment begins. Because not every message requires the same level of response. Not every person deserves the same level of access. Sometimes the most honest thing that your spirit can say is, I'm good. Not defensive, not aggressive, just clear. I'm good. Because healing eventually teaches you that your peace doesn't require performance. That you don't have to prove that you are healed. You don't have to explain your growth. You don't have to give emotional updates to everybody who decides that they're now curious about your life. Sometimes protecting your peace just looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like distance. And sometimes it looks like a calm, grounded response that simply says, I'm good. Now, before we close out today, I want to leave you guys with something to reflect on, because this conversation isn't just about other people. More importantly, it's about self-awareness. I want you to ask yourself these questions honestly. When someone checks on you, what does your reaction reveal? Does it come from peace or does it come from protection? Because protecting your peace is wisdom. But protecting your wounds can help, to sometimes keep you isolated longer than necessary. And healing is about learning to recognize the difference. Learning who deserves access to you. Learning who's safe. Learning who has shown up consistently enough to earn a deeper place in your life. That kind of discernment doesn't make you cold. It makes you wise. So if today's conversation spoke to you, I want you to sit with that today. I want you to ask yourself, who currently has access to your energy, and do they treat it like the privilege that it is? Remember, you are allowed to grow. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to curate your life in a way that honors your healing. You don't owe everyone a front row seat to the person that you are becoming. Sometimes the most powerful boundary that you can hold is silence. Sometimes the most powerful response is just simply, I'm good. Elevated Awakening Z, I'm good. Now, if anything in today's episode resonated with you, if you like, Coach, I feel that, go ahead and drop some green hearts in the chat for me. You know, that's our way of saying I'm healing, I'm growing, showing up for me today, right? And again, for those of you who are in here, if you are looking for a space where people are choosing to heal out loud, I want to invite you to join our Room2Breathe community. It is powered through school. You can access it by visiting the link in my bio or just going to selfcareclub.org. We definitely welcome you there in the space where we continue the conversations and we heal together, right? It is a safe space. We listen, we don't judge, right? And we keep each other motivated and empowered 24/7. So I do invite you guys to check out our community. It is a free community for everyone, male and female. And again, you can access it by going to the link in the bio or just visiting selfcareclub.org. Now, before we go, let me leave you all with a little extra love and light. As always, I am here to encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every single moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. This has been another Room2Breathe podcast, and I look forward to connecting with you all again soon. Thank you.